New features include being able to play as Knuckles with alternative story scenes and level designs in Sonic 3, and as an alternate character in Sonic 2. Sonic was Sega's poster boy for the Sega Genesis. However, after a long feud between the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo, Nintendo came out on top, outselling the Genesis by over 17 million units. In 1994, Sonic & Knuckles became the last Sonic game released for the Genesis, and actually, the last Sonic game to be released until 1999. Sega's next console, the Saturn,
You are approaching Saturn.
was not as big as of a commercial success as the Sega Genesis. Part of the reason Sega fell so behind was because a new player was in the market, Sony, with the PlayStation. The PlayStation was a monster, selling over 100 million units. In comparison, the Saturn only sold 9 million units. Even though there was a new Sonic game being developed for the Saturn, it never came to light, and Sega instead developed a half-assed racing game, an enhanced port for Sonic 3D Blast, and a compilation called Sonic Jam. The interesting thing about Sonic Jam is that it featured a 3D overworld for the menu, and this was actually a prototype for what was to come. Instead of focusing on the Saturn, Sega wanted to develop a new, more powerful console. But Sega was outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, and outplanned. They had to take an all-out stand. They were gonna need their right-hand man. Infamously, on September 9th, 1999, Sega released the Dreamcast, and alongside it, Sonic Adventure. At its release, the Dreamcast was the strongest system technically on the market, and Sega really wanted to use Sonic Adventure not only to showcase the Dreamcast's capabilities, but also to reclaim Sonic's throne. At its release, Sonic Adventure received critical acclaim. However, over the years, the general consensus has been that it hasn't aged well. Before I continue, I just want to comment on something that really bothers me. A lot of the time I get comments on my YouTube videos saying I've jumped on a bandwagon because I criticize Sonic. I have to disagree with this. I have stated many times that I'm a big fan of the Sonic the Hedgehog series, and on top of that, I don't think there is a bandwagon. Many people have been criticizing Sonic games the past few years not because it's suddenly become cool, but because games like Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 have received re-releases, putting these games back into the public eye very briefly. And I hate to break it to you, but these YouTubers who are criticizing Sonic didn't have YouTube channels when these games originally came out, so they're now given the opportunity to voice their opinion. I love Sonic Adventure. I have a lot of great memories playing it. I'm nostalgic towards it. But it's really flawed, and it's my duty to treat it fairly. So with that being said, new features include redesigns for classic characters, 2 new characters, a new antagonist, 6 different interconnecting storylines, a full story with in-game cutscenes and voice-acted dialogue, a new feature called the Chow Garden, and an interactive overworld which features passages to different levels and a majority of the cutscenes within the game. Instead of discussing Sonic Adventure level to level, I'm going to look at each character's story as a whole. Starting off with Sonic, we get the most comprehensive view of the story. This is the main event. Sonic arrives in Station Square to find an aquatic monster named Chaos attacking the police. Sonic defeats him, Eggman announces his plan to use Chaos to take over the world, and Sonic thinks nothing of it and hangs out by the pool, where he spots Tails' planes crashing. He rescues Tails, and the two meet up with Robotnik, now called by his proper name, Eggman. Eggman announces that he will use the Chaos Emeralds to power up Chaos, and Tails and Sonic go on a mission to find the Emeralds. While keeping them away from Eggman, they fail. They encounter Knuckles, who has been tricked by Eggman, again, and they go after the egg carrier, Eggman's flying fortress. Sonic and Tails try to fly up to the egg carrier, but get shot down, separating Tails and Sonic. Sonic meets up with Amy, she gets kidnapped, and he meets up with Tails again, who has rebuilt the Tornado, this time being powered by a Chaos Emerald. On the egg carrier, Sonic and Tails must reach the other side of the ship to find Eggman. There they face off against E-102 Gamma, one of Eggman's robots. Amy intervenes before Sonic can kill him. Tails and Amy flee the ship, and Eggman then powers Chaos up with 6 of the 7 emeralds. Sonic helps Big the Cat by defeating Chaos 6, who has Big's pet frog, Froggy, and then Sonic chases Eggman off the ship and tracks him down to the Mystic Ruins, where he comes across a mural of Chaos's full-powered self. He has a vision of the past in which Chaos has seemingly destroyed the society of Knuckles' ancestors. Sonic then faces off against Eggman one more time, ending his story. Sonic's story is definitely the most straightforward. There's no character arc, just action and adventure. He meets up with other characters, but we're not given context yet as to why they're there. The story basically boils down to Sonic versus Eggman, and there's nothing particularly wrong with that. As for his gameplay, it's a solid transition from 2D to 3D. Instead of majorly changing the structure of the game like Mario 64 did for the Mario series, Sonic Adventure tries to have a 1-1 translation from 2D to 3D. Sonic has all of his old moves and adds a few to make the game feel more like a Sonic game. The homing attack is used to give Sonic the feeling of bouncing off of enemies in a 2D space, and it works really well. There's platforming, running, and cinematic moments that all intertwine just as they did in the Genesis titles. The 3D space even helps with the problem of not seeing your enemy before they attack, but this one problem was replaced with another one: the camera. I know it's been beaten to death, but this camera is inexcusable at certain points, which sucks because Sonic does control really well. There are some points where it feels awkward, like when Sonic is running upside down or up against a wall, which just doesn't feel clean. But overall, he controls just as he did in the classic titles, just with a new plane of perspective which is being viewed by a 5-year-old with an iPad camera. Even the level selection provides new locations while simultaneously calling back to older ones. But you're also given new level themes which provide variety, but even the older ones add flair. Because when you were playing Casino Night Zone, didn't you want to see Sonic taking a shower? I mean, no, that's disgusting. I mean, just think about how wet his socks are now. Gross. The game also recreates moments from the classic games, snowboarding down a hill, boarding Eggman's base from the tornado, etc. Sonic's story captures the essence of the series while providing an overview of the story, but in order to fill in the details, you have to play the rest. Next, we get to Tails. His story picks up right where Sonic finds him. Tails is testing out a new prototype for his plane to be powered by a Chaos Emerald. His story follows Sonic's up to the point until after they get separated. Then he's determined to fend for himself, and he finishes his prototype. He picks up Sonic, follows him, and brings Amy back to Station Square. There, Eggman, after being defeated by Sonic, vows to blow up Station Square. His missile is a dud, and he races Tails to the missile. Tails beats him to it and then decides that he will take on Eggman without the help of Sonic. He succeeds, proving that he is independent of his friend. Tails' story gives him a nice arc. He gets rescued by Sonic in the beginning only to prove that he can fend for himself. Even Tails' gameplay contributes to his story. All of his levels, except for the final one against Eggman, require him to beat Sonic in a race. All of Tails' levels are present in Sonic's story, but are easier and shorter in order to make the player not feel like they're repeating the same level over and over again. Even though his gameplay is slightly different due to the fact that he can fly, the camera is the same. But having shorter levels prevents the camera from screwing up as much as it does in Sonic's story. Knuckles' story starts at the earliest point. He's guarding the Master Emerald on Angel Island, as he does, contemplating how he has to guard it forever. Chaos appears, seemingly being the cause of a now broken Master Emerald. Knuckles tries to beat him up, but he escapes. Knuckles goes looking for other pieces of the emeralds, gets a flashback of his ancestors, and sees Eggman walking with what appears to be a piece of the Master Emerald. Knuckles confronts Eggman, who shows him Chaos, and despite Knuckles knowing that this is the creature he saw when the Master Emerald broke, he allows Eggman to trick him by telling him Sonic is the one who broke the emerald. Knuckles confronts Sonic to find out he was tricked again. Knuckles fights Chaos and finds more pieces of the Master Emerald. He has one more flashback and sneaks onto the egg carrier to find the final pieces. After Sonic fights Chaos 6, Knuckles finishes the job and goes back to Angel Island with the final pieces and the rest of the Chaos Emeralds. Despite having flashbacks to his ancestors' past, Knuckles admits that he may never know why he has to guard the Master Emerald, despite basically having an opportunity to find out. Knuckles' gameplay is all about finding the missing pieces of the emerald. It's basically a treasure hunt. Some levels require a little bit of problem solving to find the emeralds, but generally, the radar of the bottom of the screen is all you need. Some of the requirements to find the emeralds are extremely easy, but some aren't immediately obvious. For example, one emerald in Casinoopolis is located inside a grate. The radar keeps beeping right below the grate, but the entrance is in a completely different spot, and the radar won't be going off while in front of this spot. So I ended up wasting my time looking for the emerald in the wrong place. The level length can vary from less than 2 minutes to over 15 because of this. Just like Tails' story, Knuckles' story is short and to the point. I just have one question about the contents of the story itself. Wouldn't it make more sense for Knuckles to be the main character? The whole story is centered around his dead culture, but he never has a realization about it or does anything about it. In fact, at the end of the story, he's still wondering why he has the job he has, which this should have been an answer within his story. This game had a perfect opportunity to do so, but decided to skip over it for whatever reason. Next, we get to Amy's story, and when we first see her, she's thinking about Sonic after going shopping. 'Cause that's what girls do, right? They think about boys while shopping. She runs into a bird that's being hunted by one of Eggman's robots, Zero, and she vows to protect it. But first, she asks Sonic to protect it because she couldn't possibly do it on her own. Instead of defeating Zero, her gameplay is centered around running away from him. Because why wouldn't Amy be the only character not capable of defeating a robot? Zero kidnaps Amy and the bird and brings them aboard the egg carrier. E1-2 Gamma confronts Amy and demands she give him the bird. Amy refuses, showing Gamma the emotion of love. She later intervenes with Sonic and Gamma's fight and prevents Sonic from killing Gamma. Amy and Tails leave the egg carrier and Amy sees that the bird is missing its family. She goes to Eggman's base to look for the family, but decides it's probably on the egg carrier instead. There, the bird finds its family and Amy beats the shit out of Zero. Finally. Amy has the shortest story, and I think I've made it obvious that I have a few problems with it. First, they aged up Amy from when we last saw her. So her obsession with Sonic is no longer a little girl with a crush, but it's someone who is close to Sonic's age. So her crush goes from being cute to kind of harassment. And since she's older now, her being kidnapped is because she's a girl, not because she's a kid. Her story is actually similar to Tails. It's about her becoming independent, but at the same time she needs a weapon and is unable to defeat Zero on her own without using her surroundings. She's clearly painted as weaker than the other characters. Plus, the focus of her story is on the bird, not her becoming independent.
Sonic, help!
Where Tails has the full focus of being independent, even though we've seen him act on his own in Sonic 3.
Next we get to Big the Cat's story, and I really don't know what to say about this, so I won't. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Haedox.
Big Story really encapsulates the feeling of being lost in the wilderness and finding true love. We first see Big in a cottage, and with his friend Froggy, he's just hanging out in a manger. But what happens to Big next is that Froggy finds a Chaos Emerald and eats it, causing him to grow a tail and grow out of control. Big, being the lover that he is, chases after Froggy, who tries to escape this fat cat. Big goes on this big adventure to try to find Froggy, and it eventually turns out successful for him when he fights Chaos 6 on the egg carrier. In a short battle, he gets Froggy back and returns him to his home without the Chaos Emerald. And after that, we don't really know what happens to Big. Could Big be living out the days with his frog lover? Could he be raising children of his own with his frog lover? After all, this is a story about frog and cat love. That's the main driving force in Big's narrative, love. Maybe unnatural love, but Big and Froggy's love is real, and we see it through the story and gameplay.
Thanks. Big's gameplay gets frustrating really quick. It involves fishing for Froggy, and the camera becomes a real hindrance. His controls are really frustrating, and his gameplay is out of place with the rest. But once you figure out how to catch Froggy the very first time, the tactic doesn't really change, and the rest of the levels become a breeze. Gamma's story is the final part, and what a lot of people call the heart and soul of the game. Gamma is a robot created in a series by Eggman. Eggman demands Gamma and his older brother Beta to battle to the death, because apparently self-sufficient robot upkeep is too expensive now. I guess Dr. Eggman has so much time on his hands that all the effort he put into these robots is meaningless. Gamma then outperforms the rest of his brothers on a task that Eggman demanded. All of his brothers are sent off and punished. Amy shows Gamma that you can care for other beings and his life is changed. He decides that he must free his siblings by destroying them, which at first seems very generic and overused, especially involving robots, until you remember that Eggman's machines are powered by little baby animals. Gamma and Beta destroy each other, and it is revealed that they are powered by the two birds that Amy's bird was looking for, and so everyone gets reunited. Yay! Huh, that's actually really clever. And don't get me wrong, the sentient robot misinterpreting something resulting in murder has been done a million times, but here, in E102 Gamma's story, it seems to be going in a generic route until you realize that the idea of freedom is literal in this established canon. The robots in Sonic have always been powered by baby animals. His gameplay, oddly enough, is the fastest paced of all, even more so than Sonic. There's emphasis on speed, but he's a robot that can shoot, and the way his shooting is incorporated into the gameplay is pretty simple. He has a time limit on the level, but he gets extra time for shooting enemies, which is a pretty clever way of combining the two types of play. Throughout all 6 stories, characters have visions of the past, and in the final Super Sonic story, all these visions come together when Chaos steals the Chaos Emeralds from Knuckles, and Tails' planes to become perfect chaos. Gross. Sonic finds out that Tykel sealed herself in the Master Emerald to prevent Chaos from eventually destroying the world. Eventually. Sonic says that he won't seal Chaos back in the Master Emerald, but instead will open his heart. Sonic defeats Chaos in the most epic and easy boss battle of all time. And then Chaos, along with Tikal and the Chows, ascend into the clouds. Heaven. Whatever. The end. Oh yeah, I skipped the part where the Chows were murdered. The end. Sonic Adventure was a very ambitious game and was very impressive for the time it was released. It wanted to showcase the power of the Dreamcast while also translating Sonic's gameplay into 3D. And let's see, 5 divided by 6 times 100. 83.3% of the stories do that. The game is still just good for its time and has not aged well. The animation is atrocious, the camera is atrocious, the voice acting is atrocious, and apparently the voice actors were never given context to the scenes they were recording for, resulting in strange line readings.
Oh no. Give it your best. Oh no.
And just to clarify, I don't think these voice actors are bad, I think they were just given really, really bad direction. I find it interesting that even though this game is called Sonic Adventure, it never feels like an adventure. All the levels are more tasks than contributions to the story. The characters always go to a level, then come back to the overworld for the story to progress. It's not linear enough to feel like a real adventure. It should be called Sonic Errand Runner. Be right back, gotta get a Chaos Emerald. Oops, Tails crashed, let me go pick him up. All the stories do interconnect, but they aren't all a part of the same story. It's more like a series of vignettes rather than an all-encompassing narrative. I do feel like the story succeeds as a story. It's not too engrossing, but it's satisfying. The story not only isn't over-dramatic, but it expands on established lore, something no other Sonic game really has tried to do. The Chaos Emeralds are a big plot point, and we get a possible explanation for why Dr. Eggman wanted the Master Emerald in the last game. And even though we've seen most of these characters before, this is when they were clearly defined. The way they talk, the way they interact with each other, and how they feel about each other. On top of that, characters like Amy and Tails are given a character arc. The story is almost everything I'd want out of Sonic the Hedgehog story. Of course, I'm not moved by it, but I had fun watching it and playing through it, and that's all it needs to be.
When I was younger, Sonic Adventure was one of my favorite games ever. And looking back on it, I am very nostalgic towards it. However, I accept its flaws. I definitely still enjoyed playing it, but I recognize that many people who didn't grow up with it may not enjoy it as much as I did. I love Sonic, and I love Sonic Adventure, but I'm not too proud enough to say that it's a great game just because I enjoy it.
It helped relaunch Sonic into the public eye after years of no main series game, and it's definitely important to the character's history and to the fans.